Everybody, thank you for joining me on today's webinar. Our Masterclass today will be looking at biometric clocking on CoolCare, showing you our biometric clocking system, understanding how that works. So, as I'm sure you all know, CoolCare is here to make operating your care home easier, more efficient, and more profitable. And today we'll be seeing how our biometric clocking devices can help in that regard. As you're using Zoom today, just to let you know, you can ask questions during today's webinar, and there will be a member of our team on board to answer any questions you might have on anything as we're going through. You can use the Q&A option on Zoom. You should find it on there, and then you can type up a question, and a member of our team will be able to see it on there and respond. So anything you think of at all, we'll do our best to answer any questions, and we will have some time at the end for any further questions people might have once the session has finished. I'll say today we are looking at our biometric clocking devices, understanding how they work. So I'll be explaining it, showing you how they all work on there and what they can do, how they differ from our previous devices, the Nomad clocking machines with the fobs. And I'll show you kind of the basic setup, getting the staff members on there as well, and how that then feeds into CoolCare through clocking and our timesheets, and understanding how that works as well, and how it all comes together. So firstly, what is biometric clocking? So biometric in this sense just means facial recognition. In our devices here, biometric devices are facial recognition, as it says there. Staff simply clock in by tapping on the screen. It will recognize their face and then be able to clock them in to CoolCare with that. Now, nice and easy to set up. You can assign a staff on the device itself, which I'll be showing it in a little bit. And essentially, for those who might have our fobbing devices, the main difference is, obviously, there wouldn't be a fob in this case, which means there's no chance of people losing fobs, which means, there's no cost in replacing fobs in there. So it's a lot more simple, a lot more streamlined, and so people don't have to remember anything on there. As I say, you can't forget a face, can you? Or you can't lose it. Certainly, I'd hope not on there. And that means, there's no risk of stuff like time fraud, being able to people clocking other staff members on the system. They can only clock in themselves, as it can only recognize them on there. And the device links up with CoolCare, automatically creating clocks and timesheets on the system. That's how it's similar to our typical devices. The other main difference being they are connected to CoolCare via the internet. Our old devices, the Nomad with the fobs, they use a mobile signal on there, whereas these use an actual internet, either Wi-Fi or wired options. You can have either on there. And they then connect to the internet and are able to send those clocks over to CoolCare when people use them. But the general interaction is still the same as the fob devices. It just sends them to our server. CoolCare then works out if they should be a clock in or clock out, and then updates the system all accordingly. So, as for setting up the devices, I would like to think fairly straightforward. The setup is actually done by our support team. If you want one, our support team sets up the device to be connected to your system, and then all you would need to do is install it in the home, get it somewhere where it needs to be, and essentially get people registered on it is the other important part. And registering staff is done through the device itself, rather than through CoolCare, where our fobs were done previously, register them on the staff record on CoolCare. This is actually done through the device itself. It automatically connects to your CoolCare system and will pick up all your staff members that are on there, and you can then assign a staff member essentially to scanning on it. That's a nice and simple process. Essentially, certain people will have access to it to be able to get into the admin side of it and get to the dashboard on there, where they can then see the user list, which can either be done by, with a face scan for certain people that have the right access, or there will be an admin card that can be used for first time setup and as a backup on there. It then will give you a list of all users, as it says there. And the good thing is these user lists essentially carry across between devices. So if you've got multiple buy stations in the same home, or you have people clocking in across multiple homes, they only need to ever enroll once on one device, and it is then shared between them through that. So pool staff, it's nice and easy for them. They don't have to worry about enrolling in multiple places. It can do them all in one go. That's, and so you can then scan their face through the device itself, through their profile on the device. It takes a picture of them, but it doesn't save it as a picture. That's the other important thing. It basically converts that picture into a string of letters and numbers, and that's what it's using to save it on there. Oh, excuse me. So there's no kind of images saved on the device, no faces that people will be able to see on there. It's all converted into essentially an anonymous format to then be saved against their profile on there. and the face, I think, will then be saved on there, and you can rinse and repeat that for all your users on the system, get them all signed up and registered on there, and then they can start clocking in and out using it. So yeah, it's a simple process. It's just the same one that we done for everyone, and then once they're there, they're saved, and you don't have to worry about doing it again. And I say there's nothing they can lose on there, and it's just as simple as tap the screen, sign in, and then they're clocked in or out. So we can show you how that comes across to CoolCare itself. If I change over to my system, just bear me 1 moment. Right. Here we are. We should be able to see CoolCare on here now. So when people are clocking in and out, essentially the first place you'll be able to see those is on your dashboard here on CoolCare. One of the widgets you can have on your dashboard is the staff on shift widget. Essentially, this tells you about any staff members that are currently clocked in at the moment, whichever way you might use that. And they'll pop up on here to say who's currently clocked in, when they clocked in, how long they've been clocked in for, and if you have a rotor on CoolCare that's set up and comparing against it, if they should be clocked in as well, as you can see on here. So I've got a few staff members that are clocked in. You can see how long they've been clocked in for. And those with the green tick means they're clocked in, they're expected to be here, they're on my rotor, and so they're all good. This one with the red cross means they're clocked in, but they're not on my rotor. And that's where we've gone, okay, this person shouldn't be clocked in right now, and we can have a look at that and see why that's happened on there. You can also see one that says AWOL, where they're expected to be here from my rotor, but they are not clocked in from the device. On there. And so we've got a couple of essentially exceptions here that we might need to look into and see what's happened. For example, this one here with the red cross, if we look a bit closer, we can see this staff member is actually a night staff in my home. They clocked in about 10 to 7 last night before their shift began. And it says, according to this, they've been clocked in for almost 17 hours now. Now, that doesn't seem correct to me, and I've actually seen them leave the building in this case as well. So we can say this person shouldn't be clocked in anymore. They may have just forgotten to clock out on the way out of the building, and so we can correct that for them using what we call our manual clocks. So if I actually click on them from the widget right here, it takes me straight to their staff record. And from there, I can then go to TNA and biometric settings if we're using a biometric device in this case. Now on here, there's a couple of things to be aware of. Firstly, this is where you can authorize a staff member to be able to enroll others on the device. So going back to what I mentioned on the biometric device, you can set up certain staff members on your system to have access to that kind of admin side of it in order to be able to sign up other users, get their faces scanned into the device. If you give them that access, I say all they can do is access that user section on the device and be able to scan in other people's faces to get them signed up and for clocking in and out. And you can do that just by clicking yes on there. And that means they can then enroll others using it. And you can change that at any points. But also on here, as you can see underneath, is where we can add in a manual clock. So if someone does forgets to clock in or out one day, we can add in a manual one to say when that clock should be, to then correct their timesheet and make sure they're then clocking in and out correctly again. So if we click the button, it then just brings up our details of the clock to fill out. We can choose a date, which can be done retroactively. It can go as far back as a week on there, as you can see. And then you also can add in the time. So in this case, this person should have clocked out at 7 a.m. this morning when their night shift ended. So you can pop in the exact time there. And if they were to be able to clock in and out across multiple homes, if they're pull staff, you could even choose which home they'd be clocking out at or in at as well. But in this case, let's say it's my home they're clocking out at. So if I then click save on there, that will pop it down the bottom of the list you can see there in that clock history. It tells me the exact date and time that I've put it in for. Currently it's processing, which means it's been sent to CoolCare server and it's just figuring out if it should be a clock in or clock out. And it tells me which home it's for and if it's a manual or a device clock on there. So if we give that a moment, it should change to a clock out. Typically that takes 2 minutes at the very most to clock in or out on here. And I will mention these manual clocks can be done if you're using the fobs as well, just through the iButton settings instead. So it's not limited to anything. Whatever you use to clock on CoolCare, you can add in these manual clocks where they're required. And as I mentioned, these can be done retroactively. So if you were to say, someone clocks in over the weekend, they might clock in Saturday morning, forget to clock out Saturday evening, and then they do the same shift on a Sunday. So they clock in Sunday morning. That that was then actually technically be a clock out because they've forgotten the clock out from the last time. And when they clock out on Sunday evening, that then becomes a clock in. So all the clocks are kind of backwards because one's been missed. You can add in a clock retroactively for that Saturday night and say, right, we've added a clock in there to correct that, and that will correct everything after it as well. So it's very smart in that sense. It will always make sure it's clocking in the right way and correcting things as it needs to. So you can see that that's changed to a clock out now, which means that staff members finish their shift as of 7 a.m. And if I were then to go back to my dashboard, we can see on here, they disappear from the widgets once they've been clocked out because it's only showing people that are clocked in or should be clocked in as well. So now I've just got green ticks on there for the most part, but I still have one AWOL staff member on there. And this could be a separate instance where they've just forgotten to clock in at the start of their shift, or it could be something else like they've not turned up and we've got an absence there, they've called in sick, something like that. You'd be able to add that onto the system and go from there. But essentially that widget is there essentially as a jumping off point. You can see exactly what's going on in real time with the system, see if we need to if there's anything I need to deal with, such as people not clocked in, not clocked out, etc. on there. And we can fix them through their staff records with those manual clocks. So that's always a good place to keep an eye on things and make sure it's all good before we then actually get to our timesheet side of things on there. So, and that is, say, the other thing that our clocking devices affect is the timesheets on here. So you can find those on your staff section in the timesheet there. And once people clock in and clock out for their shift, they will then go onto the timesheets here. And there's a couple I've got on here, as you can see. Just to mention, the ones that currently say 0 for today's date are where they've clocked in, but they've not clocked out yet. So you'll see that typically daily on there, the 0 hours where they've not clocked out. But once they do clock out, like I've got for yesterday and the day before this week, we can see the shifts that they've worked, the hours they've done on each day, and these will color code depending on how they've been set up. So they can either be, to start with, they'll either start as blue or orange on CoolCare, which means whether they have snapped a shift or not. So the shift snapping, to explain, is essentially in CoolCare in the background, you can set up, it's under your home setup section, you would find these. You can set up what are called shift definitions for your staff members, saying these are the set shift times I would have for a staff member of this certain position. So like I've got most of mine set up with a 7x7 shift on there, either a day or a night, whatever it might be on that. And so that's kind of the shift times that the system is looking for to say these are the shifts the staff members should be doing. As well as that, you can set up in that same page some kind of leeway for clocking in and out. So it doesn't have to be dead in and out on time. They can clock in a little bit early before the shift begins, after it ends as well, and even some leeway for clocking in late or clocking out early if you wanted as well. And as long as they're within those limits that you've got set up in the system, they'll then pop up in here, as I say, to be blue. And that means they've snapped a shift, they've done the right times as expected, and the shift is all good. If I show you one as an example, I can click in here. So I can see this staff member, they clocked in at about 20 to 7 before the shift begins. So 20 minutes before the shift starts, 10 minutes after the shift ended. But because that's within the limits I've got set up in my system, I think it's like I've got half an hour, 15 minutes afterwards on there. With that, it means, okay, even though they're present for 12 hours, 33 minutes, it's going to snap them to that 12-hour shift on there. So it's not being essentially giving them the extraneous time that they've clocked in for around the actual shift times. As well as that, I've got my system set up to deduct a break from them. So you can see at the top, they did a 12-hour shift, but they get 11 standard hours on the timesheets because my system's set up to deduct a 1-hour break from a 12-hour shift on there. So as long as they snap to shift and they keep doing the clocking in and out around the right times, it can snap them to the right times on there, making sure they're not getting any extraneous hours around that, and can set up any break deductions if you would not pay your staff breaks as well. That's there is an exception to that I've got, which is a blue one here that has a little bit of more time deducted. You can see rather than the 11-hour shift, it's 10.92. And if we click into that, we can see why. In this case, they've clocked in 5 minutes early. That's perfectly fine on here. However, they've also clocked out 5 minutes early on their 5 to 7 before their shift was set to end. So because that's set to clock out early, I've got my system set up to say if anyone clocks out early at all, it's only going to give them the time up to the exact minute they clock out. So because that is technically 12 hours total, it's actually 11 hours 55 minutes in this case, and then deducting an extra hour from that for their break. So the time you'll see on here is in a decimal point rather than hours and minutes, which is why we get 10.92. So yes, it can be set up to make sure that staff members are only getting paid the time they're working for. Again, all those settings can be found in your home setup section on CoolCare. But if they're completely outside the limits you've got set up, that's where they will show up as orange. You can see I've got one here that says 12.5 and it's orange on there. And so we can click into this and have a bit more of a detailed look. So again, similar kind of thing. They've clocked in around half an hour before the shift begins. That's fine. My limit for clocking in is set up to half an hour beforehand, so they're just within that limit on there. However, my limit for clocking out is 15 minutes after the shift end time because they've clocked out at 90 minutes past. That's then gone, okay, that's outside the limits I've got set up, and so it's not going to snap it to shift. In this case, you can see they were present for 12 hours, 47 minutes. And I've got my system set up to round that, so it's then rounded it to the nearest half hour for 12.5 hours on there. That's and I say with it not snapping to shift by default in CoolCare, they won't deduct any breaks from that. So that's only left with 12.5 hours that I need to deal with on there. Typically, this should still be a standard 11-hour shift in my home here, so I can still edit this on here with the standard hours. If they'd stayed on for like an extra hour or something, maybe I'd give them an extra hour pay, but in this case, it's just going to round it down to 11-hour shift that they should have done typically on there. They might have just been hanging around a little later than normal, having a conversation, finishing the drink, whatever it might be on there. So I can change that to 11 hours on here, and you can edit the shift however you need to. And when you do edit something, it's always recommended to add a note on to say why that's been changed through that. So we're just going to say not snapped due to clock out hours amended. And I always like to pop my initials on the end just so we know who's made a change on that as well. So once I then save that, we'll see the shift change and turn pink on here. A pink shift means it's been manually changed by the system. Someone's gone in and edited that shift. Either they've updated the hours on there, they've changed the position someone's worked, they've added in extra hours, which might be for overtime or stuff like that. But in this case, I've just changed the hours down to 11 to reflect what they actually worked on that day. And it just turns it pink to say, someone's changed that, so everyone else is aware of it. And that's why it's good to add in those notes, so we know, who's changed that, why it's been updated in the system. So if you do see any pink shifts on your timesheets, it means someone's had a hand in updating the hours or position on there. Last but not least, an extra step you can take is also authorizing those hours to say someone can double check those shifts, confirm that's definitely correct, and make sure any changes are authorized. Just by going into the shift, you can see there's a little tick box that authorizes on there. Now, depending on your access to CoolCare, certain people will see that, certain people won't on that. So it's a separate permission to authorize a shift in there. So you can make sure only the right people have access to authorize them through it. If I tick that box and then save it, it just turns the shift green to say, yep, that's definitely correct and confirmed on there. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, that's all the extra authorizing is. It's just an extra step to say, yep, someone's double checked and confirmed that's on there and making sure it's all correct. Of course, in a perfect world, everyone will be clocking in and out correctly around the times we expect. And, you should be seeing a nice sea of blue shifts on there with maybe the odd orange that needs a little tweak from that. But essentially, with the clocking, it makes it nice and easy. The biometric devices to just clock in on time, nice and easy, and then that will feed onto CoolCare from here. And as long as you've got the system set up to say, these are the times we expect, these are the kind of the leeway for clocking in and out, you'll then see a nice set of blue shifts on there. And of course, where it's needed, that's where your dashboard comes in handy for keeping an eye on them and making sure everyone is clocking in out correctly. And if you need to, they can also be adjusted with the manual clocks or edited on the timesheets as well. But that is our clocking in a nutshell, I say, and that's, of course, on CoolCare side of things. It doesn't matter kind of what hardware you've got, either the fobs or the biometric devices. It can then choose either, of course, the biometric devices make clocking a lot simpler without the need for fobs, without any risk of people clocking other people in and out. They're the kind of the best way to go going forward, we find, for clocking. But in essence, that's kind of all there is to it for our clocking. It really is that simple. And I'll say that's why it's actually quick and easy clocking for accurate timesheets on CoolCare. So Also today is today actually is thank you all for joining me. Just going to swap over to my presentation once again. Where am I? There we are. Oh, if you are interested in further training on CoolCare, whatever it might be, from anyone in your teams, you can arrange training with our product specialists, either online or in person. And as you might be aware, you are entitled to free training from CoolCare as well. Every customer will have at least 2 30-minute free of charge training sessions available as part of their subscription. And you can contact our training team to get in touch with us and see what training you have available. You can email us training@coolcare.co.uk, or you can phone our team and we can have a chat with you about whatever your training needs you might have and get something arranged for you. But also have to say for today's session is thank you all for joining me, and we'll see you next time. We'll be looking at our CoolCare integrations on the system, looking at how CoolCare can link in with external systems and all different ways it can connect in with other stuff. So thank you all for joining. We will leave the session open for a little bit longer just to see if anyone's got any other questions. We can answer them or anything you might think of. But otherwise, thank you all for joining me today and have a nice rest of your day.